Folks, thanks for joining. This is Dan Sullivan speaking. We've got a few more people who are in the process of signing on, so if you can just bear with us for another minute or so, and we'll get started. So again, thanks for joining, and looking forward to chatting with you today. Well, folks, again, my name is Dan Sullivan. Thanks so much for joining today. So good morning, good afternoon, and if we have some of our invitees from across the pond, good evening. Pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and thanks so much for taking your valuable time to learn how you can boost your SQL performance by 2x or potentially even greater. Joining me today is Gary Kwan, otherwise known as GQ. Gary's our Senior Vice President of Technology Strategy, and it's a pleasure to have him join me today. Gary is certainly more than well versed in what our software does and can do, having developed a lot of it himself, and also helps me out on these calls. So GQ, you out there?
Dan, glad to join you here, and don't let Dan fool you. Although he's labeled in sales, he's very technically minded. I'm just here for the deep dive questions that you may have. And speaking of that, we do like to make this session very interactive. And what I mean by interactive is if you have any questions during this session or at the end, please just look at that question box in there and type them in, and we'll either get to them during the session or at the very end. And thanks, Dan.
No, thanks again, GQ. And folks, GQ also keeps me honest in any technical discussion we have today. So thanks for that, GQ. And GQ, in that regard, relative to questions, folks, no question is a bad one. And GQ and I have done a number of these, and we get some great back and forth and great questions. So please heave ho on the questions as we go through this. So again, thanks so much for joining. Hope you and all your families are well. But really, we're here today to talk about how we can improve your SQL performance. Just a brief discussion here on who we are. So you may know of us as the Disk Keeper Corporation. So we've been in business over 39 years, 12th oldest software company in existence today. But we rebranded ourselves back in 2012. We were the preeminent disk defragmentation software product, sold over 100 million copies of Disk Keeper. But as you may recall, the world virtualized around the 2012 timeframe, and you no longer defrag a SAN or an SSD. So GQ and his team got to work and actually totally respun the software. So where today we're two light filter drivers that sit in the Windows OS and optimize Windows I/O for better performance, and also has a patented read caching engine that caches hot reads using idle and available DRAM, which gives us the ability to, on average, reduce about 30% of I/O to back-end storage, and that's an average. We have customers seeing more. Because of that, they also then see application performance improvement like SQL, improve anywhere from 50 to 300%, and that's actual customer examples. We'll speak about some later. Because of that, Gartner named us a cool vendor and said we should be installed in every virtualized initiative. So not only does SQL benefit, which we're going to focus on today, but also all applications based on Windows can benefit. Exchange, SharePoint, third-party software, domain controllers, file servers, web servers all benefit from our software. Because of what we do in the Windows environment, we're a close partnership with Microsoft. Because of what we do in virtualization, we're a close partner with VMware. And we actually have done a lot of work in the VDI space and have seen some significant performance improvements just using our software in the VDI environment. So we're a close partner here. We're a Citrix Ready partner. And just to talk a little more focused about what we do around SQL, GQ and his team recently certified under this Microsoft SQL Server I/O reliability certification. And it's pretty special. GQ, you want to just mention that briefly?
Sure, Dan. And Microsoft has certain certifications to make sure third-party products are fully compatible with their products, and in this case, SQL Server. Now, not only do we have to do some stringent testing with the SQL Server, we also had to go face a board of SQL experts, and we passed with flying colors here. Now, we're the only software vendor to achieve this certification, but we're in good company with people like HP, Dell, EMC. So this is a nice accolade for us, Dan.
It sure is, GQ, and congratulations to your team. And folks, by the way, all of the testing was done in Azure. So whether you're on-premise, whether you're a physical environment, SQL environment, virtual, or in the cloud, our software is relevant and can provide potentially significant performance improvements. So again, congratulations on that, GQ. It's interesting when we look around our customer base to see, who's buying what and for what. And what we see is that out of 7 out of our 10 new customers, so new business to us, buy our software initially to solve problems with SQL. They then go on and install us across a variety of other Windows applications. And we do a lot of surveying, and we'll talk next about what we found out. But this is kind of a word map of the most mentioned words in those surveys, and you can see what stands out amongst all those other different words. So SQL is a real sweet spot for us. And I talked about these surveys we do, and we do them annually, and we survey hundreds and thousands of IT professionals, and asking them one question about slow SQL performance, 93% said that they have users complaining about SQL performance, and 28 out of the respondents, 28% said they had severe reporting and problems. So glad you're here, because we're going to talk to you about how we can help you potentially improve and or solve issues you may be having with SQL. Now, as you may know, virtualization's been great for server efficiency, but it's been horrendous for I/O performance. What you're seeing here is the most efficient I/O environment possible, large contiguous writes emanating out of the Windows OS, moving down to the hypervisor, through the hypervisor down to storage and back again. This could also be, a physical environment with large I/O coming out of onto the storage on the physical box. But as soon as you virtualize, or even in a physical environment, the Windows I/O tax enters into the fray, and in virtualized environments, the I/O blender effect kind of doubles and magnifies the problem that's created by Windows and NTFS. And with that, GQ, would you mind talking a little bit about these two inefficiencies?
Sure, Dan. Now, the Windows I/O tax is actually created by the Windows file system. And this is all happening on the logical side of the Windows operating system on the VM. When a file gets created or extended, the file system doesn't know how big that file creation or extension is going to be. So it just looks for the next free allocation where it can put that data. Well, that free allocation may not be big enough, and it fills that up, and it then has to find another allocation. Well, that's another I/O, and so forth and so forth. So rather than find find a nice best allocation, it finds all these small ones, and guess what? You get stuck with all these random IOs coming down to the hypervisor. And then this IO blender effect, which is a term that was made recently on this whole effect here, is that you have all these small random IOs coming from all these VMs to the hypervisor, and now it has to try to sort all those out, and you can see where there is more busy work on trying to handle that. Now, Dan also indicated that this could happen in a physical environment too. And if you look at this, well, that Windows I/O attack is going to happen on your physical Windows system. And what could happen is if each of those physical systems are doing IOs to different LUNs, but on the same SAN, you get that same blender effect within the SAN there. Now, we're going to indicate how we solve this issue, but let me tell you this, is you can see as you have all these small random IOs, there's more processing that has to be done to handle those. But also, you're not taking advantage of your storage. Whenever you buy storage, a new hard disk drive or a new solid state drive, you notice they give you two performance benchmarks, one for random IO and one for sequential IO. And you'll notice that the sequential IO always outperforms the random IO. So if we can enforce nice sequential IO, you're also going to get the best performance of your storage. So thanks, Dan.
Thanks, GQ. And folks, I'd even invite you to go out and Google the IO blender effect. When I first came across it, I did the same. And it's a Gartner's term, and the definition talks about degrading storage performance and increasing latency. So obviously, in this example, if you went to write a gigabyte of data, it might take 100,000 IOs. But in this example, which is what we accomplish in environments, it may only take 50 or 60,000 IOs. So you can almost think about that we take half the cars off the highway at rush hour, pack the remaining cars full of people, and actually put them in an HOV lane that works. So that's what we focus on. And one of the best practices that we've learned is to install us on all the VMs in your environment or on a host. And this is portraying what happens when you only install us on a single VM on a particular host. Well, we've optimized that one VM, as you can see, but all the other VMs are still creating that small, tiny, random IO that gets further randomized by the hypervisor. And they actually then degrade the performance of that one VM. Now, I mentioned it's a best practice. We have customers that initially just do that and put us on one to see what improvements they get. But the improvements would not be as significant as unless it looked like this, which is us in each of the VMs on that host, optimizing IO, reducing IO, and allowing your storage to perform as best it can. And whether it's hyperconverged environment, Nutanix, HPE, SimpliVity, or all flash, pure, EMC, Extreme IO, or whatever, it all just runs faster. And it runs faster because it's dealing, as GQ said, with more contiguous IO and also fewer. So it's pretty impressive what occurs. And we have a number of folks using us on hyperconverged and all flash environments and seeing significant benefits on that. So where do we sit, folks? Well, we're that orange stripe. We're two, as I mentioned, light filter drivers that we'll talk more about, that sit up in the Windows OS and perform and coach Windows not to break up writes into small fragments. And also that's where our patented read caching engine lives. So as you can see, doesn't matter what hypervisor's in play, it doesn't matter what your environment looks like, or what the back-end storage is. If it's compatible with Windows, it's compatible with us. So we talked about what our software does, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty here about what the two filter drivers do. But from a high level, from a write optimization, again, we deliver more payload with every I/O operation. Again, we're packing the cars full of people, and we're putting them in an HOV lane that works. Contiguous I/O is more friendly, and storage accepts that in a much more friendly way than a lot of tiny, small, split random I/Os. We're giving you larger writes versus a lot of smaller writes in a sequential fashion versus in a random fashion. And the read caching engine, the patented read caching engine we're going to talk about, we take both the optimized writes, and when you go to read that optimized write back again, it's just going to read faster because it's bigger, it's more sequential, and it's not a lot of small, tiny, random I/O that have to be collected and then sent along to be read. And I'm not going to take away from GQ's thunder, but our patented caching engine using idle DRAM learns your application and puts performance robbing read I/Os into DRAM 10 to 15 times faster than all flash. And that's why I talked about performance improvements, even in hyperconverged or an all-flash environment. And GQ and his team, and we'll show you, have developed some dashboards that actually show you what it is our software is doing, both from an I/O perspective and from a time savings on your storage environment, along with a console that allows you to manage everything on a single pane of glass. So GQ, with that, I was wondering if you could take the folks through the two patented filter drivers, the first one being IntelliWrite.
I'd be glad to, Dan, but let me answer a question from Robert. He asks, does this also refer to the added I/O you would see in a SQL clustered situation? And yes, Robert, as long as you have, you know, our product on both systems, it's going to get the benefits on both clustered systems there. So it will. And then on this write reduction IntelliWrite, I indicated that the Windows file system, it doesn't know how big a file when it gets created or extension is going to be. So it doesn't know where to best place it. Well, our technology, our patented technology is very simple. We're actually monitoring the system in the background. And we have a good idea of when a file gets created or extended by either the file type or a certain application, it's going to be so big. And we feed that intelligence back to the file system. And the file system now looks for the best allocation to place that data. And what occurs from that is you get a nice single I/O going from the system down to the storage. Now, this not only makes that I/O faster, it also it clears up the bandwidth. It makes it more available to other systems on there. And this happens with the writes. Of course, when you read that data back in, now it can be read in as a single I/O too. So that's advantages on how we handle the write I/Os, Dan.
Yep. And how about our IntelliMemory?
Now, this is our other technology to handle the reads. And I think Dan mentioned this in the beginning, but our technology is different than any others. And we actually are licensed by 9 of the top 10 OEM PC manufacturers. But you don't hear about us because they use it under their name. But why we're unique and patented is basically two reasons. One is how we use your precious DRAM. You don't have to go and allocate a certain amount of DRAM for us to use for caching. we'll look and see what's available, what DRAM is not being used, and we'll take advantage of that and use that for caching. And if any user or system process comes in and needs it, we'll automatically give it back up, so there's never any memory contention issue. And as Dan said, if we can cache with your DRAM, that's 10 to 15 times faster than caching on your SSDs. So you can see how much advantage you give there. Now, the second part of the caching is how we determine what to cache and what to keep in cache to get the best cache hit rate. A lot of caches, they see, hey, this data was just read in. Let me put it in cache and hope it gets read in again. Well, we do a little more advanced technology than that. Heuristically, we're looking at what data is getting read the most, and therefore it's going to get hit in the cache the most. Now, the second part is we know certain patterns of data is going to give better performance than others. So that's the second part. And using these two will determine what to put in cache to get the best performance for you. Now, we reside there right on the virtual machine. And the reason why we're there is that's where the IO is getting created. And if we could cache that, that means we can satisfy that IO right there, eliminating that IO from having to go through the network to the storage and back again. And as the picture indicates, you can see that we freed up the bandwidth of that network. So we not only increase the performance of that system, you can see that other systems using that same network and that same storage, we just freed up that bandwidth for them to work with. Thanks, Dan.
No, it's pretty amazing. And folks, so if you think of SQL being somewhat or very read intensive, and with our patented read caching engine that learns your applications and through artificial intelligence is able to identify those performance robbing read IOs, puts them into idle DRAM. First of all, besides hitting a button to say install, there has been nothing that you've had to do to gain all of these benefits. Our software installs without a reboot. It's pretty amazing what GQ and his team did 2 years ago when we released the no reboot version of the software. As an example, we installed 151 VMs at a hospital in Georgia about a month ago in under 5 minutes. It's just use the console, select the VMs and hit install. It's really, truly amazing. So there's nothing to do there besides hitting a button. And then all of this activity around write and read optimization, again, is all done automatically. There's nothing for you to do. And by the way, if we reserve at least 1.5 gigs of that free DRAM for the OS to use. We don't even use the first 1.5 gigs. And if the OS or other applications need the memory that we're using, it gets flushed automatically. Again, nothing for you to do to gain the benefits that we've talked about. And just a little interesting note here. Years ago, GQ and his team, they trademarked the set it and forget it moniker. So we beat the Ronco chicken guy to that because, as I mentioned so far, there's nothing to do. And our customers talk about it being set it and forget it. So what GQ, and that can be a little problematic because they say, gee, everything's running great, but what are you doing? So again, GQ and his team stepped up to the plate and developed dashboards to help you and show you what it is we're doing and the benefits we're delivering. So GQ, I'd want to have you chat a little bit here about just this one page of one of the dashboards that you've developed.
Be glad to, Dan. And as Dan said, a lot of people said, what is this product doing for me? Well, as we indicated, we eliminate write IOs. Now, we don't really eliminate them. We decrease the number of IOs. So let's say, instead of doing a write that required 40 IOs. We put the intelligence in the file system, so it just takes 10 IOs to write that same amount of data. And with the read IOs, when we say eliminated, we eliminate that IO having to go down network to the storage to get satisfied because of our caching. And so what we did is we put this in a dashboard, and you could see it. You know, the dashboard allows you to see it from the last week, the last day since it's been installed. In this case, this was the last 3 weeks, and a total of, you know, 9.5 million IOs were eliminated on this system. But what does that really mean to you? So we put in another metric called the storage IO time saved. Since we're a filter driver, we know how long that IO would have taken to get satisfied down the storage. So you'll see this actual IO time saved. Now, you have to note that IOs occur in parallel. So IO time saved, you could have several IOs occurring at the same time, and this is the total IO time saved on your system. Anything else you want to add on that, Dan?
No, it's great. I guess the only thing I'd add, GQ, is while the example he used is one of an average customer, I'll say, and he mentioned over the last 3 weeks. We have folks, again, on hyper-converged environments, Nutanix and Extreme IO all flash, pure all flash, saving billions of IOs and saving days and days of storage IO time, allowing that storage environment to do other work. It's really pretty amazing what this software can do, again, without you or anyone else having to do anything to manage it. I mentioned about a single pane of glass. This happens to be just a quick snapshot of what the velocity management console looks like. And again, you can have hundreds and hundreds of VMs. We have customers with thousands of VMs and have velocity installed on it, and they can manage it all here from the console. You have the VMs that were installed on down the left, and across the top at a high level, you can see what's happening on each of those VMs from the different categories that you can see up here. And then GQ and his team put in a system status column here. And what the yellow and red is, it's not that there's a problem with the server, but I think you can tell that the ability to cache reads in idle DRAM, not having them take the trip to storage, especially on a read-intensive application, can be incredibly beneficial. So the console actually can identify those VMs where there is a read bias to that application, but there's, in the yellow case, we need a little more, we could do a better job if we had more memory to use. And in the case of it's being read, there's just not enough memory for us to even begin to build the cache. So this really helps you scan your whole environment very quickly, identifying what servers could do a better job if you could give it a little more memory, and you make the decision. But again, maximizing everything that the software can do for you very quickly and easily. GQ, anything else on the console?
No, I think you hit it, Dan. And we'll talk about SQL in one of the next slides or so on how it prevents us from doing the caching. Thanks,
Sure.
Dan.
You're welcome, GQ. So folks, I'm not going to go through these. These are just some examples. We have 20 plus case studies on our website, but I just want to share a few SQL examples here. Look at down lower left, Bell Mobility. We installed in their environment, in their virtualized environment. We reduced IO to their SAN by 61%. I said the average was 30. They got 3x faster SQL queries because of that. And again, all I had to do was install our software. ASL Marketing, batch imports dropped by 15 hours, 27 to 12 hours just by installing our software. In Creative Office Pavilion, response times for SQL and other applications, 90% faster. Really, truly amazing. So what are the benefits? We're certainly talking about SQL here and improved SQL performance. And you get better application performance, again, not only on SQL, but as our customers do, they may buy us initially for that, and then they expand across other Windows environments because of the I/O reduction they're getting and the improved application performance and throughput they're seeing. Interestingly enough, in a VDI environment, we've seen the ability to 2x the amount of VDI instances on a host because of again reducing I/O and therefore increasing the VM density. So VM density in general, but in VDI it's been very, very effective. Again, reduced timeouts and crashes in a SQL environment. Shorter backups because of either the read caching engine and or just the reduction in I/O. GQ talked about faster data rates. And at the end of the day, believe it or not, you can even extend the life of your hardware because of the performance improvements that we've been able to provide. So not having to upgrade for performance, but really only for capacity. So how to boost SQL performance. GQ, you want to chat about this?
Sure, Dan. One thing that we mentioned before is that SQL doesn't do a very good, efficient job of using the memory. What it will do is it will try to load all of its databases into memory, even though some of those databases or parts of it aren't even getting access. So if you can, and that means if it uses all the memory, there's none for IntelliMemory cache to use. So we recommend that you cap SQL memory, leaving anywhere from 8 to 16 gigabytes for the OS and our Condusiv software, our product to use for caching. And what we've seen is that we'll do a better job of using that memory to increase performance. The fact is, there was outside lab that did some testing, and they saw a 62% increase in transaction rates by limiting the SQL memory and letting us do the caching. Now, as Dan indicated, we're only going to use memory that's there. And actually, we leave some padding there. Let's say you have an 8 gigabyte system. 4 gigabytes is being used by this operating system. So there's 4 gigabytes left. We always leave at least a gig and a half always available there. So in this case, I would only leave 2.5 gigabytes for us to use. We'll use that memory. And if a user or system process comes in, we'll automatically detect that and purge our cache and give it back to the system so there's not a memory contention issue. Now, where do you get the best results? We've seen best results if you have 4 to 16 gigabytes of free memory. It all depends on what your I/O activity is, but that's what we recommend. And review, after you give us some memory, check the management console and see how much benefit you're getting from there. A little more free memory could give you even better benefits. And then step 3, after you put on your system, after a week or so, schedule a consultation with a Condusiv software sales engineer, and they'll do a dashboard review with you to show you what results you're getting.
Thanks,
Dan, anything
GQ.
you want to add?
No, that's great. Appreciate it. And again, folks, please, if you have any questions, do add them into that question box so we can take care of them here. We're almost done. Now, you may recall one of the benefits of attending today's session is to get a free copy of our IO assessment tool. It's really it's such a great tool. It monitors actually 11 different performance metrics in your environment. So you may say, well, you know I have a couple servers that maybe could benefit from this, but what are they really doing today? And I wonder if I have any others. It's a nice, tight little application. It doesn't install on the servers. It just collects Windows perfmon data. And all you do is you download the software, put it on a VM or on a laptop. You type in the server IP address into a dialog box, and you hit start. And you can collect 20, 30, 40 servers, information on those servers as you will. And it'll, after running for, let's say, 5 work days, it'll generate a CSV that will translate into this report you're seeing here. And you'll be able to see by server type across all of these different IO metrics what happened with that server type, again, with each one of those. And of course, and then the red are the ones with the worst IO deviation and the best candidates, yellow being the next, and green being those that are operating at around close to peak efficiency from an IO perspective. Again, folks, you'll learn more about your IO environment than you may have known before, and it's pretty impressive. Folks that have used this tool really appreciate the information that they get from it. But in addition to that, we also work with our prospects and customers to do a proof of concept. And it is very simple, again, since there's no reboot to install. And we generally do start in a test environment because you just want to make sure that the software doesn't break anything, et cetera, and see what it looks like. But we have a pre-call to talk about and set up the parameters for the proof of concept and set up the before and after metrics, which are so key to success and to maximizing your time in the whole POC process, so that you know what the best case is when you come out on the other side. We install the software, it takes just minutes, and run the software for a week or two, and then come back and review the results and make a decision as to whether the software is a benefit to your environment or not. Very simple. It doesn't take a lot of time and a lot of effort on your part. So, one, you'll get the IO assessment tool in an email for you to run. And, again, once that's done, let us know and we'll come back and we'll do a review with you. Or we do it all day long, we're happy to give you as much software as is applicable for you to run a very effective proof of concept. And again, we understand that it can be a crawl, walk, run process, that you put us in a test environment or on a server or two first. You get a little more comfortable with it and expand it, whatever it may be. What's important is that you see the results in your environment. And all of the case studies are great, but again, what's important is what happens with you and your environment. So GQ, questions?
Yeah, Dan, we have a few here. And Robert came, and I say he knows a little bit about caching. He says, what is a negative reclamation that the IntelliMemory cache has? In short, how long before all memory needs refreshing due to memory not being reclaimed? Actually, we will, as I said, Robert, we'll only use what memory is available. Now, if a user system process comes in there, we'll flush that out and it's automatically reclaimed. But if that memory is not needed, we'll keep our data in there. Now, that data that we're looking in there, in the background, we're always looking to see how, what new data we may need to refresh in there because of better performance or cache hit rates. So we do that in the background I have to go check on what the periodic update on that is. I'm not exactly sure on that, but we'll do that in the background. And then I see someone asked, uh, does it get installed on the host or the VMs? Our product gets installed on the VMs, the Windows VMs. And why we're there is because that's where the IOs are getting created. So if we can satisfy that IO right there, we just reduced that network and IO traffic right from the creation. And another question that goes along with that is it required to be installed on all VMs? No, it's not. You could just install it on the one VM that has the most IO bottlenecks. But as Dan indicated, that solves it for that. But you still have that bandwidth there on the internet and going to the storage. And if the other ones are still causing IO bottlenecks and that's going to affect the performance too. So we do recommend on that. And
Yeah, GQ, that's really, you may know it as kind of the noisy neighbor effect, right? That you've got all these noisy neighbors that will certainly interrupt the peaceful activity that you've got going on.
okay. And hey, Dan, this is and I see another question here, and this may be a good one for you. How's it licensed?
Yeah,
Because talk about a host license, so uh, they can install it on all the VMs without any extra costs.
yep, that's a great question. So we do have a per VM and as GQ mentioned, what we call a host license. It's a little bit maybe of a misnomer because we don't install on the host. But what a host license means is we install on all the VMs on that particular host. And the break-even point is 7. So if you have less than 7 VMs on a host, or if you have a physical box, then probably the per server license is more cost effective. But as soon as you get to 7 or more VMs, the host license is really the most cost effective deal for you.
Thanks, Dan.
Sure.
Uh, Another question here. Can you run an assessment tool against an IP range or full subnet? Unfortunately, no. This tool is you input each IP address that you want to monitor. But that's a good idea, Robert. That's a very good idea on that one. And
Way
let's
to go,
see.
Robert.
Oh, I like this other question. How safe is the caching? What happens if the system crashes? Very good question here. This is a read-only cache. That means the data that is in our cache is already on the storage. So if the system goes down, there's no loss in data integrity because your data is already on the storage. And let's see, Robert's really beating me up here. This is great. I love it. When you flush the cache, do you reclaim 100% of used memory? Yes, if we need to flush the whole cache and return the memory, we'll return everything that we had used. Yes. And oh, here, Dan, the one for you is a host license. The best potion if you auto vMotion between hosts.
So yeah, I'm going to say again, the best practice is to put us on all the VMs on a particular host or hosts, just because you may recall of that little diagram where you've got 1 or 2 VMs being optimized, but all the other VMs are still creating that small, tiny, random, noisy I/O. So the answer is, from a best practice standpoint, is yes. The license does travel though with the VM. So if it moves to another VM, the license does go with it, but you may then enter into the noisy neighbor effect. And one of the ways we've just helped folks kind of wrap their their heads around that is, again, by giving them X number of host licenses and just running the software on all the VMs on those hosts to then see the benefits that they get across their environment.
Okay, and just a few more questions here, Dan. Let's see, is it difficult to handle hundreds of deployments? And
No.
go ahead, Dan, I'll let you answer that one.
Sorry, GQ. But I think
Yeah.
I did want to mention that, again, about a month ago, we installed it at hospital. So think of this, folks, and again, everybody's application is important, but we installed on the electronic health records of a large hospital in Georgia, amongst other applications, 151 VMs through the velocity management console, hitting deploy velocity, and in 5 minutes, we were installed and running on all those 151 VMs. Now, we don't go out and try to install on 151 all at once. I think we do about 5 or 6, at a time, so we don't kind of put a big load on the network. But we do have customers, as I mentioned, too, with thousands of VMs licensed with our software. One of GQ's favorite customers is Christus Health down in Texas, again, another healthcare institution. But I think GQ, don't they have us on over 2,700 VMs in their environment?
Getting close to 3,000 now, Dan.
GQ, way to go. But that's impressive.
Yes.
I hope that answered the question.
And then, will this work on physical systems? And we brought that up before. Although we've been talking about virtual systems here, this works fine on physical systems. And you get that same I/O bottlenecks on physical systems that you get on virtual systems. And
And you
also,
can combine physical and virtual on the velocity management console,
yep.
too. So you can manage it all in one console.
And along the same line, does this just work on SQL servers? We concentrate on SQL servers here just because they're a sweet spot for us because they're so I/O intensive. But any system that is I/O intensive, file servers, exchange servers, anything that is domain controllers, if they're I/O intensive, we can help on that.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, just one more question, Dan. And you talked about desktop VDI environments. How does that help there? Well, a couple ways. One is, I'll be honest with you. You have one VDI, the guy just checks his email every now and then. You're not gonna worry too much about that performance, but those that are very active, that could help the performance there. But something that is more important is that by decreasing that I/O network traffic to the storage, you just open up that bandwidth. So you can now increase the number of VDIs from that hypervisor there. So that's a nice advantage from that. Let me check here, Dan. I think that's about it. Anything else to add, Dan?
No, so all I was going to say, GQ, is again, they didn't let us down with no questions. So thanks, folks. Those are great. I hope we answered them to your expectations. If we didn't, number one, we're certainly here to complete those questions and answer any other ones. Secondly, as you maybe can tell from even both the I/O assessment tool and/or giving you enough free software to test with, we really enjoy being, and it's part of our MO here is to be involved with you to make sure you get the maximum benefit out of the software that you're even trying, let alone if you also then end up purchasing, as most people do once they've tried it. But we do work very diligently with you to enable that proof of concept to be as productive as possible, as painless as possible, and as beneficial as it can be. So again, look in your email for not only a copy of these slides, and hopefully you'll share them with other members of your teams and environments, but also you'll be getting the copy of the IO assessment tool. So please put that to good use. And again, we're here to work with you with that or with a further installation of our software. So with that, folks, GQ, anything from your side?
No, Dan, just want to thank everyone for attending. And, I'm not a salesperson, I'm a tech guy. So I just enjoy people installing the software. And as Dan indicated, you can get a free trialware versions to install and see what gains you can get on your systems. That's what I enjoy. Thanks, Dan.
Yep, and folks, and it's very rarely, but if you don't see anything, no harm, no foul, and it uninstalls just like it installs, no reboot. And again, we're just a service; you can just shut us off. So, thanks again. Best wishes to you and your families to stay well and be safe. And we look forward to working with you in the days and months to come. GQ, thank you so much. Folks, we'll speak soon.
Thank you, everyone.